Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the late night storytelling channel, Destroyer of Souls. Today, as usual, I would like to share with you some true spiritual stories, narrated by uncles, aunts, brothers, sisters, friends, and younger ones sent to me from all over. Today, we will have a total of 2 major stories. And after reading the emails, I feel that both stories are very captivating. Looking at the titles, I'm sure you will enjoy them. Before we get into the main content, please don't forget to like, share, and most importantly, hit the subscribe button. Leave your opinions in the comments section. And I really hope to receive true spiritual stories from all of you, from family, friends, and those around you. You can send them to the email address ngofuang@fenquangmedia.com. And now, I won't take up any more of your time. Let's dive into the main content of today's video. The first big story of a girl named Phi, born in 1997, who is from the northern region. Besides Phi, there is also a younger brother born in 2002, along with their parents. Phi lives in a village on the outskirts of central Hanoi. According to her, this area is home to many universities. Some of the schools she mentions are the University of Transport Technology, the People's Security Academy, and the Academy of Cryptography Techniques. In the past, this area was just a village, but it has since been upgraded to a city. To give a brief overview of the location, the main road is Nguyen Trai, and if you go in a bit, you will reach the University of Transport Technology. Continuing a little further, will take you to the student entertainment area, which has many eateries and recreational spots. Additionally, there is a karaoke area, followed by a bridge crossing over a double pond. On the left are residential houses, while on the right is a pagoda. The name of this temple is Nguyen Temple. In front of the temple, there is a fairly large pond, and if you continue walking, you will reach the upper pavilion, followed by the stilt pavilion. From the stilt pavilion, if you go straight, you will encounter a large intersection. At this intersection, if you turn right, you will reach the police and security area, while if you go straight, you will arrive at the market. Beyond the market is the lower pavilion. The area of the lower pavilion is adjacent to a newly constructed road nearby. Close to this area, there is also a cemetery connected to the neighboring village. At the intersection, if people turn left, they will reach the committee area. If they turn right, they will arrive at the Martyrs Cemetery. Beyond the Martyrs Cemetery, you will find a primary and secondary school. Faye explains that she shares these details because the area she lives in has many spiritual stories. And although this place has become a city due to her childhood habits, she still refers to this area as the village. This village worships Bagai Great King, who is also known as Fang Xing. In Faye's village, there is a very strict custom. In the northern regions, people usually call their father Dad instead of Papa. However, in my village, it is not allowed to say Dad. One must call him Pa, because the term Dad is associated with the Holy Lord Bagai, Great King. Of course, if one accidentally says Dad, it is not a serious issue, but they will be scolded by their grandparents or parents. Faye's house is located at the entrance of the village, very close to the karaoke area in a small alley. When Faye was about 6 or 7 years old, the family's private house had not yet been built, and the whole family lived on the land of his paternal grandparents. There was a shared yard where everyone often used to hang out clothes and do household chores. To elaborate a bit more, Faye's family does not get along with her paternal grandparents. Faye's father is the fourth son, known as Uncle Four. Above him is the eldest uncle, followed by the second aunt, the third aunt, Uncle Four, and finally, Uncle Youngest. Due to an incident, the eldest uncle's right hand is disabled, making it impossible for him to open it to grasp anything. As a result, he did not marry, and when Faye's father got married, he essentially took on the role of the eldest son, managing everything from start to finish. However, the grandparents have a tendency to favor one child over another, loving some and despising others. They do not like Faye's father, assigning all the heavy tasks to him, while calling on Uncle Youngest for lighter duties, or when there is a delicious meal. When Faye's parents got married, her grandmother disapproved of the union, but Faye's father was determined to marry her. As a result, Faye's grandmother's dislike for Faye's father only intensified. Furthermore, when Faye was born as a girl, this displeased her grandmother even more, as if she held a belief in valuing sons over daughters. However, there is one fortunate point that despite the difficulties faced by her parents from the family, they still love Faye very much. Faye recalls that, in her memories, there were many incidents where her paternal grandparents treated her family in a way that made Faye feel extremely frustrated. At one point, when Faye began to grow up, she always blamed herself, thinking that it was only because she was the eldest daughter that her grandparents disliked her so much. Faye often wondered, if only I had not been born. If only I were a boy, then things would have been different. Many times, Faye even had thoughts of wanting to commit suicide. Even now, according to Faye's account, her grandparents still treat Faye's family exactly as they did in the past, with nothing having changed. However, there has been a shift in Faye's mindset towards her family. Faye has started to listen to sutras and teachings of Buddhism more, so gradually, she no longer pays too much attention to her grandparents' actions anymore. Returning to the story when Faye was 6 years old, her grandmother, despite having a very large piece of land, did not allow Faye's family to enter the house through the front door. Instead, they had to go in through the side door, which required passing through the laundry area. One day, Faye's parents took her out and came back very late. And as soon as they stepped through the side door, Faye felt an urgent need to pee. Faye was jumping up and down, insisting that she needed to go right away. And the bathroom was quite far away, so Faye's mother said, "Well, just pee here for now." At that moment, Faye felt okay because she was afraid to go outside to the bathroom since it was very dark. Faye sat down and took care of her problem. After a while, not knowing where her mother went, when she returned, her mother scolded Faye a lot, saying next time you need to use the bathroom, you have to look around carefully. Why did you do that? Faye didn't understand what was going on at all. Suddenly, she was scolded by her mother. When Faye's mother pointed up at the ceiling, Faye realized that she had urinated right under her grandmother's silk pants. At that moment, when Faye looked up, she saw those pants fluttering back and forth, even though it was very windy and hot outside. However, this wasn't a big deal, but the reason why she couldn't urinate under her grandmother's silk pants was something Faye didn't dare to ask her mother anymore. The next day, Faye had completely forgotten everything. It was all recounted by her mother. After entering the house and sleeping through the night, Faye came down with a fever, and it was quite severe. She lost all control over her body and even experienced delirium for 2 to 3 days. Faye did ask, but her mother didn't specify exactly how Faye had been delirious. However, Faye felt that there was some kind of omen And sure enough, a while later, Faye often dreamed of snakes, you know. Snakes in the corner of the house, snakes outside in the yard, snakes on the roof. There were snakes everywhere except inside Faye's family home. Snakes coiled into nests, into nests, into nests. Especially in those dreams, Faye was fully aware that she was dreaming. She was in a deep sleep. Faye remembers one time. She went out to the main yard and saw a snake with colors, hissing, raising its head very high, almost as if it wanted to bite Faye. And many times in those dreams, Faye told her mother about them. And indeed it was an omen, not long after Faye's dreams. Suddenly, Faye's elder uncle left home. Before discovering this news, Faye's family was gathered together when they suddenly heard the voice of their grandmother from the neighboring house. She was shouting,
"Where is the eldest gone?"
"Why hasn't he come home for 2 days? I don't understand why." But Grandma ran down to Faye's house in a frenzy, yelling loudly. Even the image of Grandma at that moment looked terrifying, as if she were possessed by some evil spirit or something. Faye remembers clearly what Grandma was wearing at that time. A white B-Bay shirt along with black silk pants. The same silk pants that Faye had just peed on the other day. Grandma was crying and screaming, rolling around in the yard, shouting and vomiting. She even rolled in her own vomit. I don't know what was happening, but since Faye was too young, the family didn't explain. Faye only remembers that his parents rushed to help Grandma into the house and cleaned her up. At this point, Grandma was still shouting. Suddenly, Faye's uncle appeared out of nowhere, showing up and scolding Grandma, asking, "Do you remember where Long's shirt is?" Long is the name of Faye's eldest uncle, you guys. At this moment, Grandma suddenly regained her senses, as if she were two completely different people from just a moment ago. After a while to gather herself, Grandma went inside the house to find her eldest uncle's shirt. A whole family hurriedly followed behind, holding the shirt as they walked around the yard. The land of Grandma Faye used to be very spacious, and the whole family kept walking in circles, praying as they went. All of this was done according to the instructions of the youngest uncle. In the end, do you know where the eldest uncle was? He was right behind the house, not far at all, you guys. The exact spot was where he was sitting behind the toilet. According to Faye's mother, when they found the eldest uncle, he was sitting there with a blank expression, as if he had lost his soul. His body was filthy and stank, and he didn't respond to any questions, showing no signs of awareness at all. Worried, the family quickly took him to the clinic. After examining him, they found 2 bite marks on his hand, resembling snake bites. But no one knew if it was from a venomous snake or not. And from that point on, the eldest uncle's hand has been disabled up to the present time. And somehow, Faye's eldest uncle also changed his personality completely, becoming a totally different person. The eldest uncle became gruff, prone to breaking things at the slightest provocation, and his demeanor was very sullen, looking quite frightening. Back then, Faye was still young, so whenever Faye saw the eldest uncle, Faye was very scared and didn't dare to approach him. However, because Faye was still a child, Faye didn't think about spiritual issues, ghosts. Just knew that Faye was afraid of the eldest uncle like that. And Faye still went out to play in the garden, right next to that toilet. Next to the toilet, there was a water tank and a cow pen. One day, while Faye was playing absent-mindedly there, suddenly Faye saw a child who appeared out of nowhere. He invited Faye, "Hey, let me play with you." Faye thought it would be fun to have a friend to play with, because in Faye's neighborhood back then, there were very few children. Faye played with the boy for a while. having so much fun as the two children messed around with the grass. Then the boy said to Faye, "Hey, let's go tease the cow now." Although Faye was a girl, her personality was quite boyish, and out of curiosity, she wanted to know how to tease a cow. So Faye agreed to follow him. From the patch of land next to the toilet to the cow pen, the boy crawled inside the pen and pulled the cow's tail. Faye still vividly remembered the scream that followed. It was neither the sound of a cow nor a human. It was a sound that was terrifying, something akin to the noise of a pig being slaughtered, strange and haunting in a peculiar way. In that moment, Faye completely lost awareness of anything. Even her memories, her subconscious, drifted into an indefinite void. Until Faye opened her eyes and saw the sky and clouds. That was when Faye's mother was pulling her up from the water tank next to the toilet. At that moment, Faye didn't understand why she was in the water tank anymore. Because clearly, just a moment ago, she was playing right next to the cow pen. Faye intended to ask her mother, but her mother didn't say anything, just pulled Faye straight home, washed her up. After that, she took a rattan whip and beat Faye mercilessly. While crying, Faye recounted the story. "Just now, I met a child. Then I played with it, and it led me to the cow pen." As soon as she mentioned this, Faye's mother hit her again, and the mother of the little girl beat even harder, shouting, "Are you crazy? What cows? Our house hasn't had any cows for a long time. Grandma and Grandpa needed money to build the house. They sold the cows a long time ago. Where would there be any cows left?" At this point, even though it hurt a lot, Faye held back her tears. Partly out of fear of her mother, but mostly out of confusion. But at that moment, Faye's family truly no longer had cows, and she was well aware of this. So why, when that strange child appeared, did it invite Faye to play by the cow pen? And why did Faye not have the slightest suspicion or question anything? Why did this happen? And after that event, some time passed, and when the new house of Faye's grandparents was completed, still on that same piece of land, the old house where they used to live had now turned into a storage room or something like that. Then Faye's grandparents decided to divide the land among their children. In general, it was a large piece of land that was divided up like that. Faye's family received a small plot right where the old house used to stand. Let me explain a bit about this piece of land. Back in the day, on the spacious land, there was the grandparents' house, and a makeshift house of Faye's family also located on that land. When the grandparents built a new, spacious multi-story house, still on that same land, they divided the land among their descendants. And Faye's family only got a tiny little plot, which is currently the makeshift house. And at the time when the land was all divided, about 2 or 3 months later, the Faye family decided that it was time to build a solid and proper house. While waiting for the house to be built, the Faye family moved into their grandparents' old house to stay temporarily. In front of the old house was a storage shed where the construction workers stayed temporarily. Next to the new house, slightly diagonal, was the cow pen and the bathroom. Faye's eldest uncle lived with the grandparents, while the youngest uncle had a separate area, but it was also on this large piece of land. During the time spent in the old house, while waiting for the new house to be completed, every night Faye was teased by someone. Every night felt like being continuously teased. And typically, Faye heard the sound of someone throwing dirt or stones onto the roof tiles. Sometimes, there were loud sounds of the window being yanked open. At times, there was a feeling as if someone was standing outside, pushing their finger in to pry the horizontal bar of the door open, trying to get in. Several times, Faye woke up in the middle of the night, looking through the crack in the door to see if anyone was outside, but Faye saw no one. Lying back down in bed, Faye could still hear the sounds. Faye got out of bed again, peeking through the crack once more, but still saw no one. However, the sound of something tapping against the barrier continued to echo, clearly audible to Faye. The climax came one day, when Faye's father went out with friends, leaving the two mother and child at home to sleep early. While lying there normally, Faye suddenly heard a clear voice calling Faye. "Faye, open the door for Papa." At that moment, Faye did not respond but hurriedly ran to open the door. Fortunately, Faye's mother suddenly woke up, calling out, "Hey, where are you going?" "There's no one out there. Why are you getting up instead of sleeping?" The sound of a voice pulled Faye's spirit back. Faye was dazed, fully awake, but unable to say anything when suddenly, from outside the door, a loud banging sound echoed. The knock, 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 knock resonating. After that, the space returned to silence. At this point, Faye's mother was startled to realize that something was happening. Without saying a word, she hurriedly pulled Faye back into bed. The two of them curled up in a blanket, holding each other tightly throughout the night. That night was very hot. Faye remembered clearly because of the suffocating heat. They lay like that until near dawn, when Faye finally fell asleep again. The next day, Faye asked her father, "Hey, Dad, did you come home yesterday?" Dad replied, "Yes, but I came home really late, so I slept in the storage room with the construction workers." Hearing that, Faye was very surprised, feeling that something was off. When Faye asked her mother about the events of the previous night, she just fell silent, changing the subject, unwilling to answer any further. And then, shortly after, the house of the Fayao family was built. It was called a temporary frame house, but it was livable. Therefore, Faye's mother invited a master to come and inspect the land, check the soil, and so on. That day, Faye went to school, completely unaware of everything, and later heard her mother recounting the story. Faye's mother said, "We are fortunate for our family. Our family's luck is great to have received this piece of land. Although it is small and not very square, it is safe. And on a large piece of land divided into many parts, that big piece of land, while it may seem large, is not very beautiful. As for Angkor, its land, and the old house area, where the storage house and toilet are located, Hayes, I don't even want to mention it. That place is full of ghosts. In fact, back in the day, Faye almost drowned in that water tank." In general, after the sorcerer examined the large piece of land and then looked at the small piece of land belonging to the Faye family, he said that although this piece of land was small, it was very auspicious and suitable for living. After finishing the house, Faye shared that in his region, or in the North in general, there is often an unspoken rule, like an unwritten law. That is, anyone who finishes building a house will inevitably face some misfortune. This is difficult to explain, as Faye himself has never heard it clearly defined. But Faye recounted that this is the perspective of his region. When the family finished their rituals and prayers, everyone moved into the new house to live. And that year, the Faye family indeed encountered misfortune. Faye's younger brother was still small, around 2 or 3 years old. At that time, Faye was only in the 2nd grade. His mother's shop had just reopened for business, but it was still not very stable. As for Faye's father's job, he was pushing a cart at the edge of the village. One day, for some unknown reason, Faye's father had a conflict with some colleagues, which even escalated to physical altercations. After the fight, Faye's father was injured. He had punched the head of a car with his bare hands. When they called Faye's mother to take him to the hospital, she recounted that while getting into the car with Faye's father, she noticed that his right hand, the one that had just struck the car, was twitching. She wasn't sure if it was due to nerve damage or muscle spasms, but his hand kept retracting from the back of his hand up to his elbow. Seeing this made her panic, so she took her hand to hold it still. However, when she let go, Faye's father's hand continued to twitch slowly all the way up to his shoulder. When the couple arrived at the hospital, the doctor examined him and said that Faye's father had torn a tendon in his hand and fractured a bone. The bone could be set to heal, but due to the torn tendon, his hand would never be the same again. After the doctor finished examining and treating him, Faye's mother drove him back home. With Faye's father being sick like that, everyone in the family felt sad. However, Faye and her sibling were still too young to understand the situation. But seeing their father at home, they remained cheerful. Just faced such a limitation. But that's not all. Faye's dad had just recovered. His hand was functioning normally, and then something else happened. Faye's younger brother, while playing at their grandmother's house, accidentally hit his head on the edge of the bed, right where the eyebrow is. But fortunately, the heavens were kind, and it didn't hit his eye. At first, he was fine when he got home, but by the evening, Faye's younger brother complained that he had a terrible headache. It was really painful. Their parents quickly took him to the hospital that night. Because of that, Faye was home alone. Her parents called their grandmother to come over and sleep with her. But Grandma, as Faye recounted, she did come. But as soon as she arrived, she was mumbling something, like she didn't really like Faye already. And now she hated her even more, as if Faye was bothering her too much. Something like that. Faye's grandmother did come to look after Faye, but in reality, she wasn't watching over Faye at all. Grandma was lying on the first floor, sleeping soundly and ignoring whatever Faye was doing upstairs, as if to say, "You play by yourself. I came here, and that's the end of my duty." At that time, Faye was really small, but Faye could still understand who loved and who hated her. How could she not know? On that night, Faye witnessed a spiritual event that she cannot forget to this day. Grandma was already asleep, while Faye couldn't fall asleep. Faye tossed and turned, and when she looked outside, she saw something moving on the roof of the house opposite, which belonged to the neighbors. At first, Faye thought it was just a cat, nothing to worry about. But for some reason, it felt like something compelled Faye to stare intently at the spot that was moving on the roof. The more Faye looked, the clearer it became. She saw it was a dark figure, slowly inching its way from the inside to the outside, as if it was deliberately making itself visible to Faye. At that moment, Faye was covered in goosebumps. Faye knew it wasn't a cat. It was something else. It stood on two legs and walked hunched over, just like an old lady. It came out from inside to the edge of the tiled roof, and it knew Faye could see it, so it immediately turned its head to look directly at Faye's face. No need to say, Faye was frozen in the night, you guys. Its two eyes were bloodshot, and its mouth had two terrifyingly white fangs. From head to toe, it was pitch black. Faye was sure there was no way to mistake it, because the distance from Faye's position to that place was only about 6-7 meters at most, and Faye's house was right next to a street light. The light from the lamp shone down, so it was definitely clear there was no way it could be a mirage. And at that moment, the four eyes met each other. You guys. The ghost began to smile at Faye. Its eyes grew wider, and its mouth stretched wide to the ears. And its hand, it kept raising it and waving back and forth, as if it was greeting Faye. The feeling at that moment was truly terrifying, you guys. Faye's legs seemed to have grown roots, firmly planted in the ground, wanting to run but unable to do so. In Faye's mind, whatever came to mind was shouted out loud. Things like Dad, Mom, then, oh God, oh Lord, shouting endlessly. Fortunately, after a while, Faye was able to regain control of her body. Faye jumped up onto the bed, pulled the blanket over her head, and stayed awake until the sun came up. Faye didn't dare to sleep at all. When she realized it was morning, Faye went downstairs to look for her grandmother. Even though she knew her grandmother didn't care for her, in that situation, the only adult in the house was her grandmother. But when Faye got down there, she saw that her grandmother had already left. Faye barricaded herself in the house, unable to sleep, and didn't know where to go if she ran outside. She lay in the house, waiting for her parents to come back, and only then did she feel a sense of relief. And after meeting that demon, a long time passed until Faye was 17, 18 years old. Although Faye didn't see any more events, she still heard and felt. And the family land of hers. The Feng Shui master said it was very good. Very stable, you know. Generally nothing happened, but there were many things in the surrounding area. There was one time when a story that can be described as shocking happened right in Faye's family. If at this time that story were to be revealed, it would definitely involve the law. It would relate to all sorts of things. Specifically, it goes like this. Faye's mother has an older brother, and this uncle has a daughter, a second son, and a youngest daughter. The story is quite normal until one day, the eldest sister named Bai got to know a person online named Huang. They met a few times, and then they decided to love each other and live together like husband and wife. For the first time, Sister B brought a young man named Huang home to meet the family, and the feeling was that he was not likable at all, my friends. First of all, it was his attitude. Secondly, it was his way of dressing. His style of dress looked like that of someone who was not respectable. For example, nowadays, if someone wears trendy clothes, the ripped jeans should be just the right amount of ripped, right? But in this case, the jeans were so torn that it almost seemed like he was going to expose his thigh. A man dressing like that is really unacceptable. Secondly, his way of speaking was very erratic and thoughtless. He was abrupt and rude. In general, anyone who looked at him would clearly see that he was not a decent person. It's not about judging a book by its cover, but at that moment, everyone could clearly sense that this person was definitely not someone respectable. After that meeting, although they didn't like him, Bai's family still maintained their politeness. Later, Bai's father called his daughter aside and said, "Bai, I don't think this guy is right for you. You should reconsider from the way he talks and various other things. I just feel like he's taking advantage of you." But Bai didn't listen, you know, and this girl was determined to live or die to marry that Hong guy. In the end, the family made a fuss, disagreed with the marriage, and advised her in every possible way. And then the family discovered that during their time together, Bai had slept with that Hong several times and ultimately ended up pregnant. At this point, it seems that B has fallen under Hong's spell, completely bewitched. Her family doesn't know what to do anymore. And Bai herself said, "If you don't let me marry that guy Hong, I'll leave home and follow him anyway. If you lose me, then that's on you." Of course, her parents couldn't argue with her, and they were afraid of losing their daughter, so they agreed to let them marry. But ever since the wedding, guess what? Bai has been giving all her money to Hong. It's like the only thing left for her to give him is her heart, her lungs, her liver, and her intestines. Because if she could, she'd hand those over too. She's given him everything, constantly saying husband, 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 all the time. And while Bai was at home resting during her pregnancy, she had no money. The family only had an old Daydream motorbike and another old scooter from some brand, but both were quite worn out. Yet, I still took them to the pawn shop to get money for Hong. After a while, she redeemed the two motorbikes, only to pawn them again soon after. Bai's household was always in a state of chaos, yelling, arguing over this and that, never a moment of peace. Naturally, witnessing all of this, B's parents couldn't take it anymore. They felt everything had gone too far, and there was even a time when Hong got into a heated argument with his in-laws. Then, this guy even went on to borrow money from his wife's younger brother. And on top of that, he was still living in his in-laws' house. In the end, the family couldn't take it anymore and kicked him out after one huge argument. And while arguing, Sister Bai was outside and knew nothing about the incident with Huang being kicked out. After Huang left the house, perhaps out of anger, he called Sister Bai to complain. Once she heard him, Sister Bai hurried back home, but on the way, her water broke or something like that. The family immediately took her to the clinic to give birth. When both mother and child were safe and sound, even though Sister Bai was still weak and unable to walk, she insisted on going to find her husband. Sister Bai cried and screamed like someone blinded by love to the point of being beyond help. However, due to her still fragile condition and her family advising her, as well as providing financial support for diapers and milk for the baby, everything remained relatively calm for about a month. Then suddenly, one day, Sister Bai took her newborn child and went somewhere no one knew. She left quietly, without saying a word to anyone. At this moment, the family was very confused. Sister Bai was like that, with no money at all. The child was just over a month old, only a few days. Everyone was very worried, not knowing what to do at all. 2 or 3 days later, Sister Bai called home and said, "I'm with my husband now. He has rented a place for me. You guys don't need to worry anymore." After saying that, she hung up the phone abruptly. At this point, the family was truly unable to bear the worry any longer. Initially, only family members went to search, but now they had to mobilize all their connections, like friends, neighbors, and search every nook and cranny in the area. Fortunately, the family found Sister Bai in a shabby, dark, and old rental house, located deep in an alley near the end of the village. They had to forcibly bring Sister Bai back. As for that Hong, Sister Bai's husband, the family also went looking for him but couldn't find him anywhere. He had completely vanished. And when Sister Bai returned home, it was not peaceful at all, my friends. Oh my God. Day and night, Sister Bai kept crying out, insisting, "I have to go out to find Hong. I must find Hong at all costs." During the time Sister Bai fell silent, her expression was truly blank, like someone who had lost all their spirit. And when Sister Bai spoke, she only mentioned, "Where is my husband? Where is my good-for-nothing husband?" Sister Bai's child cried, but she wouldn't nurse, wouldn't prepare milk, showed no concern, and completely ignored her own child. At this point, the family began to notice something very strange. Sister Bai's parents wondered how it was possible that within just a year, Sister B had changed so drastically. Her behaviors were so odd that everyone started to suspect, asking themselves whether it had something to do with the supernatural. After a while of searching and consulting skilled shamans, the family decided to take Sister Bai to meet a shaman. The trip included Faye's aunt, Sister Bai's mother, and Sister Bai herself. The shaman's house was located in a village nearby, not far away at all. When they arrived, the three family members sat waiting outside, Aunt, Sister Bai's mother, and Sister Bai. While waiting, Sister Bai's expression remained very vacant, devoid of any vitality at all. One day, out of the blue, a woman named Sister Hoa came to have her fortune told. She had to sit and wait like everyone else. Suddenly, while sitting there normally, Sister Hoa turned to look at Sister Bai, who was sitting next to her, and began to laugh. Sister Hoa laughed maniacally, a wild, raucous laugh that suggested she was very amused, but it had a very savage quality to it. Faye's aunt recounted that, at that moment, Sister Hoa's expression resembled that of an ordinary girl, yet for some reason, it radiated the aura of a drug addict high on substances. People began to feel suspicious. However, Faye's family of three continued to wait for their turn to see the fortune teller. When all three of them entered, the fortune teller glanced at Sister B intently for a moment, then suddenly said, "Since you're here, come in. Why are you out there laughing? Do you believe I can shut your mouth for you?" At that moment, Faye's family did not understand what was happening. The fortune teller squinted her eyes and looked outside, causing everyone to turn and look as well. They saw Sister Hoa, who had been sitting and laughing just a moment ago, now beginning to cry. Sister Hoa was sobbing softly, then transitioned to crying uncontrollably, pounding her fists on her chest, crying out loudly like a child. Ha, ha, ha. After that, she abruptly switched to laughter, hi, 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 and then back to crying again. It was a cycle of laughter and tears, like someone who was mentally unstable. Seeing the situation unfold, the fortune teller inside finally said, "If you've arrived, then come in. Don't cause a ruckus out there anymore." Upon hearing this, Sister Hoa stood up, walked inside, and sat down in front of the fortune teller, next to Faye's family. Faye's aunt recounted that, at that moment, Sister Hoa temporarily stopped her commotion, but she bowed her head down. Her head was lowered, yet her body was shaking. Shaking continuously, as if she was trying to hold back laughter or something was wrong with her. However, the fortune teller didn't say anything. She turned to look directly into the face of B's mother and said, "Your family is lucky to have found this girl and brought her to me. If you hadn't made it in time, your daughter would have just been an empty shell, both literally and figuratively. You understand the figurative meaning, right? But the literal meaning of this part is what's truly terrifying." After hearing that, Bai's mother was taken aback and asked, "What do you mean, teacher? Please tell me." The fortune teller replied, "Your daughter has been enchanted by that guy, having her organs taken out and offered to him, loving him with all her heart and soul. I'll tell you, he even intends to have your daughter sign a paper to sell her organs to him." Good heavens, hearing this, do you find it horrifying? Is love like this? There's no need to say much about it. At this point, Bai's mother felt her hands and feet go weak because no one knew about this. She just asked, "Master, how did you know?" The fortune teller didn't answer that question but turned to look at Hoa sitting across the room. The master said, "Look at her." Immediately, Hoa burst into laughter, then spoke in a southern accent, a slurred tone. Like the speech of a drunk person, Hoa said, "You guys are so quick. Just one more day and I'll get my reward." Then she laughed, And next, she pointed directly at B's face, saying, I. When I came, I saw she was weak, so I followed her. I heard her husband saying that now they should sell a kidney to get money for him to pay off his debts. I was so happy because I'm about to have a servant for myself. You two, Faye, got here early, or else this girl would have died already. Her husband has sent someone to check her out already. I followed that guy to prepare. If this girl dies, I'll make her come down to serve me. As soon as it spoke, the demon's soul laughed. The fortune teller saw this and slammed the table once as if to intimidate, causing the demon's soul to refrain from speaking further. But it seemed still very pleased, bowing its head down, yet its body trembled, indicating it was trying to hold back its laughter. I need to explain a bit for you to understand. The male demon's soul has possessed Sister Hoa. It is not the demon's soul from the love talisman that Hoang, Sister Bai's husband, used to cast on Sister Bai. In fact, this demon's soul is that of a demon who died of addiction in the boarding house, the room that Hong rented for Sister B and her child to live in. Therefore, this demon's soul knows Hang's intention, which is to sell Sister Bai's organs. So it waits for Sister Bai to die to take her soul. But fortunately, it caught the delightful scent of Sister Bai, so it decided to follow her back home. So, it is like this. From the moment Sister Bai was in the rented room, brought back home by her family, this evil spirit also followed. It stood waiting outside the door, until Sister Bai was taken to the house of the shaman. This evil spirit also followed, with the sole purpose of wanting to be close to Sister Bai. To be precise, when it arrived here, the evil spirit recounted that story. It told the shaman beforehand, and then the shaman made it confess to the family of Sister Bai, so they could understand the whole situation clearly. Come here, the fortune teller just told Faye's family. Now, I will break the love spell and exorcise the evil spirit from your daughter. As for other matters, which are worldly affairs, I cannot manage. The family must resolve them themselves. This spell-breaking process is really creepy, you guys. The fortune teller asked Faye's aunt to buy her 9 raw chicken eggs. She instructed her to go quickly, while the fortune teller would prepare the items for the ritual. When Faye's aunt returned, the fortune teller had everything arranged. The aunt handed the fortune teller the 9 eggs she had just bought and placed them on a plate. After chanting for a while, the fortune teller told Sister Bai to lie down and began rolling the eggs. After rolling the first egg, she cracked it into a bowl. It was clear that she had just bought the eggs from an acquaintance, and they were still warm, yet when cracked open, the inside was pitch black. It even had hair and teeth floating inside. That scene was truly horrifying, you guys. Just at the first egg, suddenly Chibi opened her eyes. You guys. Chibi made a move as if someone had just snatched her child away. She turned to look straight into the teacher's face, then unexpectedly tried to run over to grab the bowl containing the freshly cracked egg yolk, intending to drink it all in one go. Fortunately, the teacher called her 2 disciples to hold HBI tightly, then told the family to pin her down. At that moment, HBI seemed to possess immense strength, growling like a wild beast that had been starved for days. She rolled over and over, struggling fiercely, looking very terrifying. But the shaman did not hesitate and continued to roll the eggs. And the eggs, my friends, gradually, when rolling the second third, and then the 4th egg, Sister B began to calm down. The color inside the egg also faded gradually. At first, It was a very dark black, then slowly turned into a blood color. By the time of the 9th egg, it returned to its normal color, which is the yolk and white, like a regular egg, with no unusual signs anymore. At this point, the shaman said that the spell had been successfully broken. Now, it was time to expel the evil spirit, to drive away the evil spirit of the addict so that it would no longer follow Sister Bai. The journey to expel the evil spirit was quite easy, my friends. There were no major issues, since this evil spirit was well aware of the shaman's great skill. Everything happened very quickly, with no resistance from the spirit. At the end of that day, the shaman gave an important instruction. Go home, and for a week, you must continue to roll eggs for this girl. If the inside of the egg is clear as normal, then there's no problem. But if there's anything unusual, immediately bring this girl back to see me. The shaman also emphasized that once the egg has been rolled, it must not be eaten. Neither can humans eat it, nor can animals. One must either burn it or bury it in a place far from the house. As for the spell, I have already broken the spell for this girl. However, I also warn that the one who cast the spell will not be able to find this girl. Somehow, he will still linger around. The family must remember very carefully not to let the two of them meet. If you disobey, the family must take full responsibility. So everyone took Bee home, and they took turns keeping watch and looking after her. Faye's uncle, since he lived nearby, also came over to help guard Bai and to see if Hong was lurking around the house. And indeed, he was lurking, folks. But he was completely covered up, even more than those girls who go out wearing ninja masks, hiding their faces. However, his figure looked familiar, which made everyone suspicious. At that moment, the men in the house discussed among themselves. Better to kill the wrong person than to let the real one slip away. It was like, if you're not Hong, you must be a thief, sneaking around our house like that. Because who would act like that if they were a decent person? When the opportunity arose, the family planned to jump out and catch this guy, but he revved his engine and sped away. This happened about 2 or 3 times, and finally, the family managed to catch him. They then dragged him out to an empty lot near the house. Oh my goodness, everyone beat him up thoroughly. Afterward, Faye recounted that when they pulled up his shirt to hit him, they saw a long scar on the left side of his waist. Anyone could tell right away that this guy had sold one of his kidneys, so everyone felt a bit uneasy. At that moment, they stopped hitting him, thinking that if they continued, this guy might die. After that, they took him to the police to report him, but at that time, there was no evidence, so they just detained him temporarily and then let him go. And since then, Sister Bai has returned to normal, raising her child alone. Later, she also took another step, that is, she remarried. And the second husband is quite good, you guys. The two of them had a child, which can be seen as a blessing from heaven. As for Hoang, Faye once asked Sister Bai about this. Sister Bai replied that she doesn't clearly remember those days when she was under the spell. In general, that was a period when everyone talked about it, not Sister B herself. She said that, at that time, her mind was completely muddled, unable to remember anything. However, she does remember that Hong already had a child with his wife. That is, he deceived Faye's sister, because at that time he already had a wife and children but still went to marry Faye's sister. Faye asked further, "Did you know about that?" Sister Bai replied, "Of course I knew, but I was determined to marry this guy no matter what. It seems that Sister Bai was under some kind of spell or something. Because normally, who would act like that, right, you guys? Then Faye asked more. Do you remember what that guy did for a living? Sister Bai replied that he told me he worked in health consulting. Upon hearing this, Faye felt a chill run down his spine. Everyone, Faye began to piece together the entire situation. This guy Hoang already had a wife and children, but due to a lack of money, he sold one of his kidneys, yet it still wasn't enough. Therefore, he resorted to using a love charm to deceive Sister Bai, planning to sell her organs to pay off his debts and for his own expenses. And if the family doesn't find Sister Bai in time, then you can probably guess the outcome, right? And here we are, at the end of the first big story. And now, we will move on to the second big story. This story is about a person named Long who sent me an email. And this Long is from King Hua, and the story I'm about to tell may not be suitable for those who often take the bus, especially on the last buses of the day. The first event, according to Long's account, happened after the COVID pandemic ended, and Long had gotten a job as a bus assistant driver. If I remember correctly, it was on November 22, 2022, around 1:30 a.m. At that time, Long was sleeping when suddenly he woke up with a start. He looked out the window and saw a shadow passing by. Long's feeling at that moment was that it might be his mother getting up to go to the bathroom, so he didn't think much of it and went back to sleep. However, about 15 minutes later, Long was startled awake for the second time. Just like the first time, he saw a shadow glide by again. At this point, Long started to feel, why is that? Why did my mom go to the bathroom twice, only 15 minutes apart? Long then ran out to open the door, looked around, but there was not a single person in sight. Just then, a hand gently patted Long on the shoulder, and a voice said, "What are you doing here, my son? Why are you still standing here at this hour? What are you looking at that you won't go to sleep?" The person was none other than Long's mother. Long immediately asked, Mom, have you been outside just now?" Mom replied, "No, I just started going outside now." "But is something wrong, my son?" At this moment, Long felt suspicious, but he said nothing. He just replied yes. "It's nothing, Mom." After that, Long went back into the room and continued to sleep. Around 3 a.m., Long was startled again, but this time it was different from the previous 2 times. Long's limbs were completely stiff, but his eyes were still open, and he could still look around. At that moment, Long looked down at the foot of the bed and clearly saw, right in front of him. It peeked up from underneath, as if someone was hiding there to look at him. Although Long couldn't see the face or specific shape clearly, he only saw a dark color, and Long knew it was a head. His skin was crawling all over, and Long felt scared. Extremely scared, my friends. There's no need to say much. Right at this moment, Long is feeling confused and very scared. Long doesn't know what to do at all. Immediately, the head that Long saw earlier poked up again, and now it stretches out 2 hands and grabs Long's legs. Long knows he is experiencing sleep paralysis, but there's no way to escape at that moment. All Long could do was open his mouth and chant, "Grandma, please save me. Grandma, please save me, save me." At that moment, Long heard a voice beside his ear. "You should chant the Buddha's name, my child. Chant the Buddha's name." At that time, Long had no idea who was speaking, but he vaguely heard that sound in his ear. Long immediately began to chant the Buddha's name in his mind. About 5-10 minutes later, the shadow under the bed disappeared, and Long's limbs could move normally again.
Sweat was pouring down his body. Cold sweat, my friends.
Long sat up, feeling very tired, as if he had just gone through a crisis. After that, Long lay still for about 10-15 minutes to calm himself down before falling straight back to sleep. The next morning, everything returned to normal. Nothing unusual happened anymore. Long also didn't intend to tell his mother about this incident, but about a month later, as the two of them had a chance to sit and talk about some issue, Long decided to recount what had happened the previous month. Later, Long's mother went to see a fortune teller, and the fortune teller said that it was Long's grandmother who came to save him, and that was also the first and only time she had returned. And the story doesn't end here, guys. After Long told that story to his mother, about 3 or 4 days later, while working, Long remembered it was 10:30 p.m. Since Long worked as a bus ticket inspector, it seemed to be for a private company or something. At that time, Long and the driver were driving back to the terminal to return the bus to the company. On the way, when passing by a station, Long saw a woman who looked about 30 to 32 years old. Long tapped the driver on the shoulder and said, "Hey, uncle, at this hour, there are still passengers heading to the city, huh?" The driver replied, "Must be passengers coming back late, that's all." After that, the driver pulled the bus into the terminal to pick up the last passenger on the last trip of the day. As soon as Long opened the bus door, he immediately felt the cold air. Guys, it was so suddenly cold. It felt like a stream of air, rushing in, making Long's skin prickle, goosebumps all over. He felt a chill run down his spine, and the hairs on his body stood on end. When that woman stepped onto the bus, Long asked her, "Excuse me, where would you like to go now?" But Long thought, maybe she's just tired. So he tried to ask again, "Oh, excuse me, where are you heading to now?" And the woman handed Long a piece of paper on which was written, "I want to go to Lan Shan Specialized School in the city." Long tore the ticket and gave it to the woman, and she paid normally. And the bus continued its journey to the city, and from that position to the center was only about 10 kilometers away. Long recounted that on that stretch of road, the bus passed by a field with no houses around, only the streetlights illuminating the area. But then, after a while, suddenly, all the streetlights went out at once. And Long was startled. Long just said to the driver, "Oh my God, why is there still a power outage at this hour, driver?" The driver calmly replied, "Oh my, power outages are normal, kid. It will probably come back in a little while. It's nothing to worry about." The two of them, along with the customer lady, continued to sit on the bus. About 10 minutes later, Long began to feel that something was wrong. Long tapped the driver on the shoulder and said, "Hey, usually we drive for about 10 minutes and we're close to the overpass into the city. Why haven't we arrived yet?" The driver was silent at this moment, saying nothing. Long sat next to him, feeling that something was off. Long started to look around, glancing in every direction outside, but he didn't see any streetlights, nor any cars passing by. Until Long turned back to look at the last row of seats, he was startled. Long asked the driver, "Hey, where did that customer lady go?" "She's disappeared. I can't see her anywhere." "Oh my God." The driver was also startled. He looked in the rearview mirror down towards the back of the bus and exclaimed, "Oh, that's right. There was a customer who got on the bus. You opened the door for her to get on, and the bus hasn't stopped at all, so how could she have gotten off?" At this moment, both the uncle and the grandson were very scared. The more terrifying thing was that the car had been driving for a while now, yet they still had not reached the city. Long just asked the driver, "Uncle, is it possible that we've encountered a ghost and we are being hidden by it?" The driver immediately replied, "Right now, you should listen to me. Open Google Maps and see where we are." At that time, the car was still moving, but when Long opened Google Maps, he was so horrified that he threw his phone away. Because the car was speeding down the road, but the location on Google Maps, it was standing still, not moving at all. And this route was National Highway 47, where vehicles frequently passed by. However, in that moment, there was not a single vehicle on that entire stretch of road. The driver at this moment didn't know what was happening either, so he turned around to ask Long, "Where is our bus going?" The driver turned to look at Long and saw that the phone had fallen to the ground. He was startled and said, "Damn it." "Oh, no." He said it exactly like that. "Guys. Oh, shit. Could it be? We've been blinded by ghosts, man." Long confided, "I don't know how other buses are, but on the bus I took that day with the driver, there were some incense sticks and joss paper in the trunk near the dashboard." At this point, the driver said, "Now I will pull the car over to the side. You go to the back of the car, open the trunk, and take out the cut banana stem. Then bring it back here to me." And at that moment, Long followed the driver's advice. The driver took out a candy bag, along with some joss paper and 3 incense sticks. After that, he got out onto the road and prayed, "If there are any spirits here, please grant me permission to offer you this candy so that I can return to the bus station, back home to my wife and children." The driver continued to pray about 3 or 4 times. I don't know if you believe it, but right at that moment, all the streetlights suddenly lit up at once. The driver immediately called out to Long, "Quick, get in the car." The two of them got into the car and continued to drive. Since the lights came on, the car drove for another 10 minutes, just as per the normal schedule. Then the car arrived at the foot of the overpass leading into the city. It was a truly terrifying story. It may sound easy when told, but at that moment, picking up a female ghost on the bus was already scary enough, and being haunted in the middle of the night made it even worse. So how could one not be afraid? Long shared, "This is an unforgettable experience." Faye was also so terrified that he later asked to quit his job as a bus assistant. And here we come to the end of the second great story. Also, the end of our video today. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to Faye and Long for sending me 2 very interesting and creepy stories today, giving me the opportunity to share them with all of you, the audience. As usual, if you enjoy the content of this video, don't forget to hit like, share, and most importantly, click on the subscribe button. Please also click on the bell icon next to it to receive notifications when I release new videos. Don't forget to leave your comments below to help increase interaction with the channel. I am also looking forward to receiving spiritual stories from everyone through the email address njofong@fenwangmedia.com. And now, thank you all once again. Goodbye, and see you in the next video.